much of our lives inside, either in traffic at work or close eyes. How about we all agree that it's way overdue to take back our lives?
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Work Wherever podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about AI, automation, the ability to work wherever so you can live every day like it is Saturday. And today we got a good one. It is a traditional podcast, a long form, if you will, a interview. Whereas we say we do these once a month, and we're going to stick to those. And I have a excellent guest on today. He is a Microsoft Power Platform Global Blackbelt, which means he can kick your ass in real life and on the internet. Mr. Bobby Chang, how are you, buddy?
Hey, good, Roy. Thanks so much. Work from everywhere. I'm not working from Scranton today, but it's really good to virtually meet you,
Yeah,
man.
nice to meet you as well. I love the hoodie. We were talking a little bit before the show about both of our love for Dunder Mifflin, but where they sell car parts or mufflers or really anything that's more interesting than paper.
I'm sure those guys are into generative AI already, right, Roy? So we're just gonna get kicking right here for sure.
I watch that show so often, and I'm like, man, Michael Scott was not as crazy as we thought he was. You know?
Yeah. I don't know. Is everybody else becoming more crazy that normalizes Michael Scott, or I don't know?
Right. You say real business is done on paper. Like, huh? So that's while Michael Scott might be a part of the topic of du jour, today we're going to talk a little bit about generative AI. So this is one of those questions that, and I'll get your initial 2 cents, 10 cents, $1.50 on generative AI versus AI, because a lot of the industry now, since generative AI and Copilot and OpenAI has made things so readily accessible to the general public, there's this huge misunderstanding or gap in knowledge, I'll call it, as to what actually generative AI is. And you know, when you ask people on the streets or in a business meeting or, you know, C-level execs even, when they say AI, what they really mean is ChatGPT. And they don't know how to draw the line between all of the other technology web services stacks out there. And then just, well, I told, do you guys use AI? Oh, yeah, I asked it the other day to give me a good recipe. And you're like, well, hold on a second. There's, what do you mean? Where did you go? So what are you seeing in terms of the adoption and how people are starting to familiarize themselves with things outside of ChatGPT, but then has ChatGPT kind of been, have people been able to expand outside of the generative AI text world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic, right, Roy? Because frankly, it's one that bleeds over to every day. Now, you know, you could essentially say most people have GPT-4 in their
Right.
pockets now, right? And it depends on what you want to do with it. And it bleeds over to the everyday world so much that that's what people equate it to. It's like, oh yeah, it's that thing that I do. Especially if you see the first 6 months or the first year since ChatGPT was introduced, is this kind of this explosion of like, what can I do with AI now? And having enterprise customers and organizations and leaderships are trying to fine tune that to something that's beyond the just, hey, help me write my sixth grade kid's paper, right?
Yeah.
Like what can I do to actually make an impact in organization? And we're seeing, you know, organization across multiple industries that's actually doing some really creative stuff to minimize risk, right? Like to help with customer service, to detect fraud. And there's so many aspects of it that people are doing, and it's really bound to your imaginations where it even, you know, in the first few months of the explosion of generative AI, even folks that are really embedded in AI are kind of grappling that their job will never be the same again, right? Where
Yeah.
historically, for many decades, you basically train AI models to be really good at that thing that it's trained to do. It's no longer a concept now. It's like generative AI is just so smart and has been trained in so many data set. What can I do to combine the brain of generative AI with their sets of contents and datas and things that they care about, marry the two to get AI to do what you want AI to do. So I'm with you. I think it's you're starting to see like different maturity level where a lot of organizations and enterprises has already gone out of the experimenter phase and actually capture benefits. But by and large, though, if you talk to most folks, even like the smartest folks that are in tech, they kind of like, oh yeah, it's that thing that we kind of just do over the weekend to come up with creative stories or come up
Mhm.
with fun recipe or reformat my emails, you know? So like to your point, like what can we do to get out of this concept of novelty to something that's impactful, right? And that's sort of like the where are you as an organization to figuring out what that recipe is, because that's where it's going to set you apart to, you know, help retain talent, to be able to fend off your competitors, because if you're not doing it, somebody else in your space is,
Yeah.
right? Like, so you got to make sure that you're there to define what that means for your organization.
That's the I think that last sentence you just said there is, if you're not doing, somebody else in your space is. That's the driver right now, as to, because we're seeing innovation here like we've never seen.
Yeah,
Well, maybe not since the assembly line or the industrial revolution. Like
yeah,
this is totally new, totally changing jobs. When we went from cows to plowing fields to tractors to plowing fields, that was a huge change, but the human was still in the driver's
right,
seat. Now we're starting to
right,
see this change where it's, well, hold on, is the human still in the driver's seat? And I am still seeing out there this Skynet belief that the AI is coming for your jobs, and and maybe it was a social media problem where in the beginning you had these
yeah,
influencers, I'll call them, that went on the Instagrams and the LinkedIn's and the TikToks of the world, and we're talking about how they could write an entire business proposal and then get the AI to do the business for them and carry it out.
right.
So first, I'll just ask you: do you believe that AI is coming for everyone's jobs? And then from there, we'll have a deeper conversation of how to actually utilize AI.
Yeah, I think there's a big part of it, and that's why, you know, the mantra of responsible AI, it's just super important, right? Like as part of it, it's also like, what do you do with the vast amount of data now that you get? And frankly, even ChatGPT is catching a lot of flack for that, right? Where you have what I call the commercial space, where, you know, the privacy guarantees aren't there as much as the enterprise space, right? Where
Yeah.
if you're enterprise space, even for OpenAI, they're going to adhere to make sure that the data that you are interacting with, the instructions, you know, the what you want AI to know about you to get AI to help you, right? Like that you don't take that contextual knowledge to then be able to train the data and do something else with it, right? And there's very strict, stringent privacy control that needs to come at the enterprise world. And I know for us, from a Microsoft perspective, we always guarantee that anything that you do from our services perspective, whether it's generative AI or anything at all, the data, your data is your data, right? So I think a big part of responsible AI is very much making sure that the privacy promise against with the enterprise customers are still intact. But I think there's also a larger questions in saying like who's really in control? Are you in control, or is AI in control? Right? Like it's kind of part of it is the media, right? Like, we were talking about
Yeah.
Terminator there, Roy. Like who's really in control? Like is AI actually dictating you what you to do, or are you getting AI to do what you want it to do? I mean, I see kind of at the end of the day, machine learning, in my opinion, is nothing more than mathematical equations, right? In the back there's a brain there for even generative AI, the really smart brain that's computing with massive amount of GPUs that needs to power it. It still comes down to zeros and ones. You know? So basically what you feed it as instruction is compute in a massive and super computer fast processing manner to come out with outputs that's generated with these mathematical equation, right? Because all of your instruction basically goes into the engine, and behind the scenes, it's just doing mathematical compute, right? So I just see it at the end of the day. I was like, hey, you're just getting a really smart friend to do what you want it to do by giving it the things that you care about, right? So I, I feel like if I put it that way, it's at least for me, it's less quote unquote scary, because it's just hey, what can I do to basically do like have a really fun calculator basically, right?
Right.
Like a calculator is nothing more than a device that I punch things in that I want to know what's 3,422 times 85 because I can't do that, right?
Right.
So, like, if I have a fun, complex calculator that do more than just number calculations or compute, then I can make it write a poem, like send a thank you email, generate an image, right? Like I think it's a lot more fun output, but we still, I think, don't know how to use the calculator. And that's just to borrow the calculator, not to go in a complete tangent here, Roy. Like when we were going to grade schools, right? I don't know if we can remember. That's way back
Yeah.
for some of us.
Right.
But
Yeah.
like you
I had a
you
little
s-
bit of
yeah,
hair
you
when
start
that was
with
going on.
yeah, yeah. Well, you start with like a simple calculator that has nothing but numbers and a couple of the math operation, right? And then like when you get to high school, I remember like we were upgraded to the TI,
TI
the
83,
Texas
man.
Instrument TI
Yeah.
82, TI 83, right? And you're like, holy smokes,
It's
this
got
thing does
games.
graph, right? It got games exactly, but it takes a little bit for you to come in from that like really simple calculator to the TIs, right? So I think to me, it's just nothing more than an engine that we still, as even tech professional, as society, are still figure out like how to best get out of this really complex mathematical genius to get it to do what we want it to do.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the calculator because that is my favorite example for generative AI. Because if you're using the calculator to just kind of calculate it on its own, then you're not going to get the answers that you're actually looking for. It's going to,
Right, right,
hallucinate, if you will. And so
sure,
in a business sense, our co-pilot, we'll use that word, or our AI calculator is going to give us the information that we're looking for in a sense that we can still write okay, 2 plus 2, 4. Okay, I write it down. But what is every, response to a teacher who we only wrote 4 on a piece of paper? And that was,
right,
how did you
right,
how did you get this? Show your work, right?
right.
And I feel like that portion of it at the time, it was super annoying, right? We're like, what do you mean? I typed it into the computer, and the computer told me that's what it was. That's my work, But the understanding of how to like reverse engineer the math
How do you
problem
get
and how
there?
to go through it,
Right,
that was
right,
equally as important as getting the answer. And I feel like that's where we're at with generative AI. Could we just type something into ChatGPT or Copilot, or if we're building
right.
our own open AI on Azure, could we just type and copy and paste? Yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some things in there that give you away that it's copy and pasted AI. And then also there's going to be some things in there that you better understand if you're putting it onto a document, a business document or a legal document, or
Maintenance.
so,
Right,
you got to show your
right.
work as an employee. So
Absolutely.
it might help people, to a point where you're copy and pasting. It might help those people to kind of get off the ground. Maybe they get their butt in the seat. But at some point, I'm like you. I'm not as afraid of the if then statements in the back, because I know how to show my work. I know how we got to the equation, at least for
Right,
most of it,
right.
and I can break it down and say, okay, this got me to draft. Now I'm going to make it more human. I'm going to add in our thought processes around it, make it more Roy. Because anybody who's ever stared at a blank piece of paper knows that it's really hard to get started. That's the hardest part when you're writing something.
You're spot on. You're spot on. I'm really liking this analogy, right? Because to your point, we always had to show our work,
Yeah,
even before the calculators. You need to know, hey, even if you're wrong, right? The teacher will give you partial credit because you showed your thought process in getting there. I'm wondering, I know this is like a big debate of like to use ChatGPT or not to use ChatGPT. I just kind of see it like, hey, forget ChatGPT as a brand. I mean, I think it's generative AI as a
yeah,
capability, right? Like to whether we are going to allow that usage even in the academic world. I love there was an interview in like USA Today just a few months ago, and I can't remember unfortunately the really smart lady's name, but she was working in academic and she was asked by the host saying like, "Hey, how do you feel about the kids cheating
Mm.
by using ChatGPT now to write their papers, right? And of course, there's a big debate, like the state of New York blocked ChatGPT months after it was introduced,
Yep.
only to lift it back up the
Right.
following academic year because they knew they couldn't stop it, right? Like, it was like, how do you stop the use when
How do you stop the
anybody could
internet?
use their own?
Right.
Yeah, like anybody could just jump on their own mobile devices. Like, you're not gonna. I mean, there's just no way out of there. And her response was brilliant. Her response says, instead of worrying if your kid's going to use ChatGPT, why don't you just assume and promote that they all do it, right? Just go home, use ChatGPT, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to come in with the output that ChatGPT provided. No devices. You literally print it out, and together as a group during class time you debate and you fix and you update what it produced to your point, right? To your analogy before, Roy, like show how you got there, show how you tweak it, show where it's good and where it's not good, and how you can put your own stamp behind your work because ChatGPT should be your starting point and generative AI should be your starting point, right? And I hope academic catches fast enough to that mantra, right? And we often like put academic or even like federal agency work usually as like people that are on the laggard side. So I really hope that at least some teachers are a little bit more open-minded because I don't think we're that far away in a world where where Copilot and these generative AI capabilities right into the productivity stack where you can just open a Word document and basically say, write me 10 pages on Queen Victoria, right? Like, but you also don't want the kids to basically say, awesome. Now I'm 2 minutes in and I'm done,
Right.
right? You almost have to be able to tell them to or construct their mind in being creative and analytical and skeptical, right? Like you almost have to teach that as a way to do rational thinking with along working side generative AI because I think we're just obviously in the very early infant stages of what this thing can do and where it's going to take us. Like think about like 10 or 15 years where these kids are going to be actually at the work spot and where AI is going to be in just basically every facet of what they do, right? If they don't learn it today, what are they going to do when they get to the work spot and it's proliferated in everything that they do?
I totally agree. So my children are homeschooled, but I introduced ChatGPT to my oldest, my 13-year-old, and took the same approach as what you just mentioned, where it was like, look, like this is not the answer. This is a piece of what could become the answer. So read this, understand it, know that it's probably wrong in some instances within it. And rephrase it. I love the idea of taking the exact prompt and then debating the exact prompt. I love that idea. I think that is so cool.
Right.
So much of technology is done outside of tech. My wife and I teach a introduction to computer science and an introduction to Python course. The introduction to computer science is to the younger kids, so it's elementary school, middle school, and then the Python is high school kids. And
awesome.
It's been a lot of fun. And we have started the conversation with them shutting the machines and saying, this is the design lifecycle. So before we build anything, let's understand who we're building it for, what they're into. You brought the Rogers bell curve and the laggards, where are we early adopters? Are we early majority? Where are we at on this? And who are we building it for? And why are we building it? And then, because so many of these kids want to dive straight in and they're like, well, I just want to build because these Blockly, the Microsoft make codes and everything like that it goes. I feel like that's the same approach we need to take with generative AI as adults. We've gotten a new toy and you can jump right in and start messing with it. And to some extent, we need to encourage that. But we also need to encourage the understanding of the process and what all is involved from the human aspect to say, look, this is a tool.
Sure.
This is a part of your work. This is something to help get you to a draft or a better draft than you would have just writing it up. There's a couple agencies, and I'm not going to say who the agencies are that we're supporting right now that are using ChatGPT and the Bing Enterprise. I guess it's Copilot now. It used to be called Bing Chat, right?
Yeah.
And they would say, and I thought of this while you were speaking, is ask it for the response, and then when you take it, it's going to articulate it into a like PhD. This is what he said yesterday, into a PhD type of writing. But we want it in plain language speak. Our audience is coming to this information because they don't understand the information. So take the information, rephrase it, add in plain speak so that we can articulate it to who we're actually trying to reach. Because these AIs, these generative AIs, they don't totally understand your audience. In fact, they don't really at all. That's your job. And so this is a tool to get us to a better draft. And there's a few use cases that I really enjoy around generative AI, but I would love to hear any use cases that you've heard around empowerment of the individual instead of, because you brought up the debate between the AIs, right? There's are we using this to replace our workforce, or are we using this to empower our workforce? And that's become a big topic of discussion, so much so where people are starting to boycott it, which I have another question for you after that. But for the AI, the empowerment versus replace, how do you sit on that? I obviously know where you sit because I've had this conversation with you before, but how do you view that?
Oh man, that one it's a big one, right, Roy?
Yeah.
Like you like to think that jobs always changes anyways, right? Like in the days of, I think a perfect example for it is the banks before the ATM was introduced, right? They always came in like, hey, the banks were a way to draw money, and you go up to the tellers. And when ATM was introduced, the tellers were all freaking out. They're like, oh my goodness, we're going to lose our job now because no one needs to talk to us anymore. They have a machine to do it. And with the introduction of ATM, actually, what they found is they kept the same amount of tellers, and they just change it into a higher level of interactions, right? Like, so a lot of the ATM, uh, what they would normally do that's now taken by ATM is shifted to a higher, richer conversation, potentially opening up different account if they want to shift mortgage, right? Like a lot more um, very in-depth customer experience type of interactions that these tellers end up seeing after the invention of ATM. And of course, that's a long, long time ago. But from a lot of what I see in my own, at least, pocket of experiences of where we're pushing generative AI to organizations, is that they're also seeing that this is about empowerment of people to do better at what they're doing, so that you take kind of the mundane part out of it and enriching those components, right? Like, so I see that, but to also say that it doesn't replace job or take people's job away, I think would be kind of irresponsible to say that out loud too, right, Roy? I mean, you're seeing the entertainment industry, like even people that are highly paid, all the way to the actors and actresses and directors that are frankly freaking out that they're saying like, "Hey, my $100 million studio is no longer needed because I could put a backdrop in generative AI that cost me all of $2,000."
Yeah.
So I don't know where do you see that, right? Like it's kind of like, yeah, I think if used responsibly, going back to what we're saying, we could empower the people to do better, to help the entire organization save costs, save money, and generate more revenue, right? You're seeing a lot of that, and companies already thriving with so many generative AI scenarios that they're bringing into the market, into their product set, into their day-to-day processes. But in others, you also see it as a way like, hey, can I take this more on and buy more GPUs so I don't have to hire as many people, or I could cut my workforce by 10%, right? Like, so I think it does both, and there's a big debate in saying like how much do we want to support this, because it goes from a socioeconomic side too, to the more top 1% of the population, right? Like it kind of supports like the bottom line of the executive, while potentially taking down people that are a little bit more like where manual effort is no longer needed, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, man.
It is a tough one. It for sure is a tough one. I look at it from a human perspective to say that, have you ever, I won't name the company. Actually, yes, I will, because screw them. Have you ever used Expedia before?
Sure.
Yeah, so Expedia, I had their system messed up, double booked. I actually did an entire podcast episode. That's why I was like, you know what? The podcast is already out there. So I double booked a flight, obviously by accident. The flight that I was going to had a connector, and the system double booked my flight to the connector, and then I had one connect. So it was like I had 3 flights, 2 that were going to the one place, and then 1 that was going somewhere else. And to me, it was blatantly obvious that this was an error on either the system or it. And if it wasn't on the system, it was before I took the flight. So like, we need to cancel this. Well, the chatbot is the first line of customer service there. And so like I'm talking to this obvious bot that is pretending to be named like, you know, Elizabeth or something. And I'm like, you're a bot, please transfer me out of the bot, you know, talk to a person. And it left such a bad taste in my mouth that the bot wanted to, and the bot is smart enough where can analyze my text to say, is this person being truthful? Are they changing their story? You know?
Right.
And it deemed that I was inconsistent with my story, where I'm like, just send me to a human so that like we can take a look at this and clearly like identify that never happened until it got escalated to a point where I finally got a manager on the phone. And at that point, they're like, well, I have to stand by the conversation because of what was implemented. And so the customer service level there, obviously they are reducing the numbers of their customer service team because they want to get people through the bot, or they're trying to get the low level stuff handled so that when they do escalate it, they're talking to the bigger areas. To your point, the ATM, I think, is an amazing example for what it is that we're talking about. Expedia for me is what my initial experience was, is a masterclass on how not to implement AI. I think that as humans, since our guardrails are up against these machines, we're going to naturally turn to more human interaction. So the ATM came out, and at first I'm going to go to the ATM because of how convenient it is. When I'm making a deposit now, I go inside. I walk past the ATM. Now, if I'm just taking a couple, bucks out or whatever, then I go to the ATM, right? But I value the human interaction so much more because of how rare it is at some points. And I think that we're at this point where it's AI, generative AI. And at some point we're going to go, where are all the humans? And then we're going to start looking for that opportunity to interface with humans. And I think that is coming. And I think that the businesses now, the big enterprise organizations who are doing mass layoffs in the name of AI are going to feel bad about it. I don't think that history will be very good to them for the layoff, for laying off. Now, I'm not saying don't use generative AI, because obviously we are, and this entire podcast conversation is around how to use it and why you should. So I think that there is absolutely a place for empowerment. We can now get people. I mean, Bobby, let's talk about 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, how hard it was for an entry-level person to get a job, because you needed 3 years of experience. You go through college, you graduate college. Sorry, entry-level position, you need 3 years of experience because you need to hit the ground running. Okay, well, that door is now opened to an entry-level person who has 0 experience, but maybe went through college and understands the high-level principles of the topic, so they know how to use the prompt to get them to a specific response so they can create a draft so they can give it to a senior member. That door, I think, is opened. While the senior level, maybe high level paid person who's been in the industry for 20 years and they has the historical knowledge, maybe their value is slightly lowered. I think we've opened up a whole nother door to the future of work. And I think there is going to be that balance, like we always see, where it's the older demographic of the workforce is going to need to evolve to the new technology, similar to when the internet came out. And the younger generation of the workforce, I think, is presented with an amazing opportunity to get into an industry that they might have not had the opportunity to get into even 5 years ago. So I'm very optimistic with this technology. I know there's a lot of people who aren't, but I'm on the more optimistic side, so long as organizations are using it in an ethical way. And I think the ones who aren't, we're going to know. We're going to be able to see.
Yeah, and I think it helps too, right, with the dilemma that you're seeing from the aging demographic just globally, right? Where you are going to see where people are going to come out of the workforce and are going to be top heavy. US is being one of those prime example where baby boomers are all getting ready to cash their pension checks, and frankly, there's not enough of the next 3 or 4 generations to support the amount of people that are getting ready to retire over the next decade or two, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that too, where you hear the concept of doing more with less. I mean, that's literally and figuratively
That was the
we would
problem
have to
anyways,
figure that out, right?
right?
Yeah, we would have to figure that out, right? So to your point, like I think there has always been a value of human interactions, whether you're extrovert or introvert, right? Like I think at the end of the day, we are by human being, and this is done through research, right? That we are just social people, right? Whether some of us look for it more than others, but we at the end of the day, we cannot survive without actual human interactions and context, right? And that's just the truth. I think there will always be a spot where human contacts are needed, and and this could probably be, and probably I'm sure have been talked to in many of your podcasts in the past, Roy, about like the whole hybrid and telecommute and being remote altogether and being in the office 100% and kind of in between, right? Like I think we're kind of doing this pendulum where we're trying to figure out like do we need people in the mix or a human touch at all or not, right? And I think the fact that the pandemic brought a huge conundrum in saying that everybody has to be remote, now like people are fighting how hard back that pendulum needs to go back. But I think at its core, I still truly believe that every single one of us, and I count myself as an introvert, but again, at the end of the day, like each and every one of us would long that social interaction at some point, right? Like, and I think we as human being would need that in order to thrive in what we bring in productivity world and contributing to the society. So I completely agree with what you were saying there for sure.
I love this conversation. I could keep you all afternoon. I think that we're at I feel like I've kept you over, but I appreciate you so much for coming on, man. And the last conversation piece that I wanted to have here was around the internet. So I think that we're around the same age. I might be a little older than you. I don't know. You've aged a lot better than I have. But we had the internet, and I remember sitting on the internet and going on the internet and my parents being like, "What are you doing? Get off AOL," you know. So, but had I not understood how to break my father's computer multiple times over, which, sorry, Dad, for installing all of the malware, through things like Angel Fire. Do you remember Angel Fire, or like the free website builders that existed out there? And MySpace allowed you to add HTML so you can make your background move and play music when someone got to your page. Those things that seemed relatively dumb when we were kids, just fun things, have now turned into a career in development. I wonder what we could potentially be holding back from our youth if we don't introduce them to this generative AI and they understand how to ethically do it now.
I'm totally with you.
Because the boomers, love my parents, But there's been an email or two of some Persian prince that is trying to get them some money, or
Nigerian, right?
or chain emails that go out there, where you're like, are you serious right now? Like, you don't understand this? And there's going to be something there with generative AI, whether it's the next evolution of the telescam or the email thread or something totally new. But if our youth doesn't understand this technology way better than we do, then they might find themselves in a place that's dangerous, that they are potentially getting replaced because they don't understand the technology. So I'm totally on board with everything you've been saying. How do you see that with the youth? How do you see that? Do you see this generative AI similar to the internet? Like, do you think this is their generation's internet?
It'll be on steroid, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because I still remember the day where I sat down with my dad and gave a tutorial on search engine.
Right.
I still remember the day. He's sitting on his big chair, right? One day I was like, "Hey, you need to tell me these things because all my friends are talking about it." I was like, "Well, let's do it because, you need that as a skill." Yeah, of course, we didn't know at that point that it's going to come into basically everybody's pocket through a
Right.
smartphone, right? Like, we didn't know the explosion that's going to come a decade or two later. But I still remember, Roy, the day where I was just like, "Hey, this box right here at the top, you basically type things that you want to know about, like where to eat and
Yeah.
the news of the day, right? Like he was like going in with his 11 fingers, right?
Right.
Like typing in and trying to figure out. Now he's probably a better search engine guy than me looking for
Right.
information. But to your point too, I think that's why, to go back to the original topic that we're talking about of showing your work, right? I think that the concept of critical thinking it's way more essential now and 10, 20 years down the road than it will ever be in history, right? Because if you think about the amount of things that people can create now with the technology in the wrong hands, it's also there as a threat, right? Like deepfake and thinking about like just all those things that from informational source perspective that you can now easily spread the wrong thing. I think arming our next generation with how to, number one, protect themselves as much as possible, right? Not to be caught in that dilemma, and how to also deal with information that basically is just going to fly across, not just necessarily from a WhatsApp forwarded thing
Yeah.
about a Nigerian prince, right? Right? Like some of these wrong information could really take down somebody's life. So I think all that is, it's definitely a concern. And I love some of the things that you've been able to share, even to work alongside your kids, right? Because I think we as parents shouldn't be afraid of that. I think we should be able to, if anything else, arm the younger generation with the tools and the thought process to be able to work alongside it, because it's not going to go away. So like, how do we bring responsible AI, and not to just also put it into the corporation, but like at the individual level, like how do we teach people how to be responsible with, frankly, the tooling that they're going to have that could create potential malicious content too, right? So I know that's its own kind of philosophical debate there, Roy, but I just hope that there's enough people like yourself that would take the time to talk to folks that are high school or lower, your own kids, to be able to have that knowledge of how to work alongside technology. Because I just think like we're such in the beginning stages of this. It'll be scary if people are going into the world that we'll be in a few years without the knowledge of how to work with their surrounding.
Yeah. I totally agree. Before I let you go, there's a lot of people listening who probably maybe are on the fence, haven't utilized AI. I know this year alone, January, February, I've gotten more people DMing me, emailing me, asking me to speak around generative AI and how do I use it? That's the big topic, right? How do I use it? How do I use it? How do I use it? So, well, two-part question is, how can somebody get started using generative AI with the tools that Microsoft has readily available to them? And then the second the second question is, how do I know when to get off the generative AI free platform that exists and into something more advanced on the Microsoft Azure OpenAI where I'm using my own data? How do I balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the quickest way to get started is something that you mentioned in the past would be Microsoft Copilot, in my opinion. The idea behind Microsoft Copilot is that think of it as a way to use the GPT brain against a search engine, right? So what I like about Microsoft Copilot is that the basically index is the index of the search engine, the Bing search engine, the world, right? So basically world content, and you're putting it GPT smartness on top of it. So being able to access Microsoft Copilot, which is at no additional cost, you just go to look for Microsoft Copilot that you can download as an app in your phone. And at that point, you now have your GPT-4 friend to be able to interact with the world's content to get to your information that you're looking for. So that's at no additional cost. Where we start to see when does it make sense to pay for some of the premium feature is going to depend on what you're trying to do to get out of it, right? And a lot of times, most of the time that I talk to are with large enterprise customers. Obviously, with large enterprise customers, their goal and objective is really like what can they get to be more productive for their staff and to create better experiences for people they're interacting with, whether it's a customer, vendors, and suppliers. Then that's where we see a lot of the, we call it like, I guess, paid services for the Copilot, right? Like, and it depends on your role at that point. And what we love about the Microsoft ecosystem is we can talk to just about anybody, right? We have, for example, a leading security platform. So for the security people, the co-pilot that they're talking to, the GPT friend, is going to help a security officer to do better at the job, like identify potential threat, look at surface vector, how am I meeting my security and compliance requirements. Those are kind of the interactions that I have in a conversational way using um, Copilot and GPT technology to be able to identify those things that I, as a security officer, care about, right? Now, in my world, of course, I work with a lot of app developers in the low code, no code movement, right? Do we care about security in people being able to access our app in a secure manner? That's not my day to day, too, right? My day to day is not really just all about security and governance at large. It's also about delivering a good app experiences. So, the co-pilot in my experience is going to be how can I create a wonderful enterprise ready app by also having conversation with copilot. So I would say the number one to get started, if you haven't checked out any of the Microsoft Copilot or GPT experiences, would be downloading the Microsoft Copilot app, which is available to anyone at no additional cost. And then we also have capabilities where you can actually get onboarded to free and trial licenses to just stand up a Microsoft 365 license and then experiment with a lot of these Copilot features depending on what you really care about. Whether you're a security guy, you're a pro developer, you are a guy that cares about our low code, no code movement and want to check out what we can do inside of Power Apps and create conversational AI using Copilot Studio and so forth. So there's so many different opportunities, and I feel so blessed to be working in a company that covers so many services that has, frankly, GPT readiness in every single one of these areas.
Yeah,
Hope I
it's
didn't ramble there, Roy, but
no, man.
wanted to just kind of
That's the
provide some of the
answer.
landscape that we have there.
Yeah, no, that's the answer. And that's the answer that I've been giving people is, get into Copilot, which I have my Copilot on my phone. I have my app and I use it. I mean, we're friends on LinkedIn. I use it and I'm like, hey, create me a dolly image of a bald guy with a brown
Yeah,
beard,
yeah.
So, and then I just tag that, put that at the bottom of my post, right? So I use Dolly 3 and which is part of the Copilot Bing app, right? I believe that they are kind of intertwined.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, like, hey, create me some fun picture, right? Like here's my photo and change me into a Mario character. Like it's
right.
really fun to play with. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, I love it. And then the Microsoft Copilot's Playground, I think, is an amazing tool. To the low code, no code, I came up a SharePoint developer many moons ago, and then I originally started actually writing code in Notepad, And then when Dreamweaver came out, it was, oh God, it's helping me write code. This is the end of developers as we know it, right? So as the developer in me, I'm always kind of like scared of the new tool to come out. But where I'm at in my career now, when Copilot came out, I'm like, I don't know that this is going to replace the low-code, no-code developer. It's just another thing we have to learn in order to get us to building a better Power Automate or to building a better Canvas app tool. Or, maybe now it used to take a year to build a Canvas app, and now we can deploy them in 60 to 90 days, So it's just getting the useful tools into the hands of the customer quicker, better, faster. So I think Copilot has been a tremendous tool from that respect, from a low-code, no-code developer. And this is somebody who, I wrote HTML to now, I'm less developing now and more on the oversight, but seeing the movement of in the low-code, no-code community has been tremendous. And we're able to deliver, and our customers are extremely happy with the release of Canvas apps and Power Automate. So Microsoft's doing a great job. I think Copilot is obviously the leader in their relationship with OpenAI. And I mean, if you're using generative AI somewhere that's not ChatGPT, OpenAI, or Azure, with the Copilot, I don't know why you're doing it, to be honest. But I guess give those guys, their breadcrumbs. But the Microsoft tools are, and I'm not just saying that because I'm an MSP CSP. I think that realistically, they're the best tools available to. So Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a joy to have you. Sorry we didn't talk enough about the Michael Scott philosophies of business. Maybe next time we'll do a book club talk on
Another
somehow
podcast.
I manage.
There you go.
Well, thanks so much. How can people keep up with you and follow you?
Just check me out on LinkedIn. I think I'm probably I don't post as much as you do, Roy, but I definitely post potential like events that might be interesting in the Microsoft ecosystem, especially if you are a fan of the Power Platform. I try to make sure that if there are new capabilities coming that's interesting and events that's might be coming around your neck of the wood, that's available to you at no additional cost in LinkedIn. So yeah, definitely check me out. Just look for Bobby Chang at Microsoft in LinkedIn, and you probably find me there somewhere.
Well, if you need to post more, I know a pretty good generative AI tool that can help you think of some posts.
There you go. There you go. We'll post it in Dolly and get some
That's
promotional
right.
marketing images out of
We
it
can
too, right?
we can put you in the conference room with Dwight and Pam, and everything will
There
be.
you go.
Well, thank you so
Man,
much
sounds
for
like
coming
we gotta do
on,
something.
Bobby. This has been a blast, man. And guys, hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. Thanks, Bobby. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. Like and share this content. We're putting this on for free, no ads or anything like that, so that you guys can get the most up-to-date information. Thanks for hanging out. Like us on all social medias, YouTube, Spotify, wherever your podcasts are listened. Go to goworkwherever.com to get a full list of all of our previous podcasts as well. Guys, thanks for hanging out. And until next time, see you.
Hey there! Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for all the latest videos from Capital Presence.